welcome to another episode of Beyond the Frets. I'm extremely excited to present my next guest, Sherri Chung. She is a film composer, TV composer, pianist, vocalist, performer, songwriter. She just about does it all. She has recently composed the music for Gremlins, Secret of the Mogwai, a new comedy thriller called Based on a True Story on Peacock, and TV series like Batwoman, Riverdale, and The Red Line. We talked about her roots as a composer and musician. She spent some time in music school getting a composition degree, and she was an assistant and orchestrator for the great Walter Murphy, whose music everyone knows through Family Guy and those kind of related Seth MacFarlane series. I had an absolute blast talking to her personally because have always been such a huge movie fanatic, and such a film composer fanatic as well. It's really been not so secret dream of mine that I'd love to do work for film and TV at some point. So I really kind of got into the process with her just because it's a world that I don't know. I'm on the periphery of it as a professional musician, but I don't have any friends who are full-time film composers. So I just had such a blast talking her ear off about the process and how this world works. As a composer, I wanted to figure out, well, how do you toe the line between giving what the director or writers or the artistic team or the suit people, giving them what they want, but also putting yourself into the music and not getting maybe too attached because you are working on crazy deadlines. And it's just a different story if you had all the time in the world and it was your own project under your own name, so to speak, not under the auspices of, a film or TV company. So you're really going to enjoy this interview. It's a really cool departure from my other guests, but we also have a lot of common ground because we talk about improvisation, we talk about art, we talk about being a human in this crazy space as a full-time musician. So without further ado, I hope you sit down, grab an axe, and get abducted. Welcome to Beyond the Frets. Hey, Sherri, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
I'm here.
Oh, and that's my phone thinking that I'm talking to her. I'm gonna shut that off.
Oh, I know.
It happens all the time. I was teaching the other day, and I thought someone's phone went off. I was like, "Can you turn that off, please?" And then they were like, "It's yours." Like, because my Siri kept going off. I'm like, "Oh, sorry, dudes."
It happens a lot around me.
Right. Well, yes, I think yes, exactly. I'm so grateful that I get to talk to a film and TV and media composer because I've been always a cinephile because my dad is in the movie business. He does producing and like line producing and all of that stuff and budgets. So it's always been in the family, like that side of things. And like from when I was a little kid, he would steal me from mom and we would stay up till like 4 a.m. watching all the movies I wasn't allowed to watch. But then I would interact with the music, and that was such an important kind of indelible influence for me. So I'm super excited to talk to you because I've not interviewed a film composer. So I'm super stoked.
Nice. All right. Maiden voyage. Here we go.
Yes. Maiden voyage. Exactly. If you don't mind giving my audience a little bit of background about you, we don't have to stay too long in the historical things because I'll make sure to send them to, where they can find that. If you don't mind introducing yourself, where you're from.
Yeah. So my name is Sherri Chung, and I'm a composer for film and television, and probably video games too, but I haven't done any video games. So, you never know. Documentaries, whatever. But yeah, my background is totally in music. I didn't just fall into this, profession. It was something that I wanted to do. So I'm a classically trained pianist, and I sing. I won't say that I'm a singer. I just sing. And so at some point, a lot of that kind of came together, and I was creative enough and that I at least tried my hand at songwriting. So that's kind of where I started the music writing, was songwriting. And then I saw the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner. I'm laughing because I love this movie. I don't think it really holds up. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
I do love the movie. I think it's great. It has a phenomenal score that does hold up, in my opinion, by Michael Kamen. And, having been around music all growing up, you kind of are aware that there's a job of composer. So you know that exists. So when I heard this music, of course I'd seen movies before, but nothing had really moved me like this score. And I was like, what is that? I don't know what I just heard or what I just experienced, but I want to do that. And I was still in like middle school, high school at the time. So, I was just like, I wanted to go to school for composition and theory. So I did my undergrad in composition and theory, with a piano, performance, that kind of thing. And then I came out to Los Angeles and did their graduate program at University of Southern California. And at the time, there were really not that many programs at all that you could sort of learn. There's one in Berkeley, in Boston. There was University of Miami. Out here, you have University of Southern California and UCLA. And I think maybe that was it at the time or something. But, the ones I was really interested in going to were the ones out here in Los Angeles, because at that time, if you want to get into the movie business at all, you need to be out here. Now it's different. It's very, very different. But anyway, so that's kind of where I landed in terms of schooling. I definitely went that formal training route. It was a very decisive path that I wanted to be on. And then as I was graduating grad school out here in Los Angeles, I landed an assistant position with a composer named Walter Murphy, who does all of the Family Guy. Not all of it. I guess he splits it with at the time Ron Jones, but now I think Joel McNeely. But in any case, Walter Murphy did Family Guy, American Dad, and at the time he was starting another show called The Cleveland Show. I just became his assistant, did not do any writing for him, eventually started doing some orchestration work for him as well, and just learned a lot about, running a ship in television, basically, like running a lot of like TV, that kind of schedule, which is insane, working with live musicians, going to the scoring stage at least once a week, sometimes twice a week to record all these things, and just really watch that process. And I learned so much. I was with him for about 7 years. But during that time, I was also working on my own student films, short projects, indie films, commercials, all stuff like that. So I was sort of cutting my teeth in my arena, as it were. That was in air quotes for any of your listeners.
Right. I'll make sure. Yeah.
Air quotes in my arena, and while learning, let's say, out of my arena, or like above my league or out of my league, if you will. And that was really great. And then shortly, I'm making this short, but then
oh, you're cool.
5 or 6 years after I graduated grad school, one of the advisors that had been there, Blake Neely, was sort of beefing up his team or sort of creating a writing team, because he'd gotten this huge influx of episodic shows, and he was just like, I'm going to need some help. And so he called me up and said, hey, do you want to be on my writing team and work with me? And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. So again, I was still working on my own projects, but again, I sort of consider this working in my league and then working above my league or out of my league. And I think that's certainly not the only way to get into this industry in the film music world, but it's certainly like apprenticeship is a really good way to do it, And I would say that that's kind of what I felt like Blake became to me, as like sort of a mentor and eventually a collaborator. And we ended up doing shows together as co-credits on, screen credits as well. And then after, I'm still doing my own thing. So after a while, it just kind of became me doing my own things and me working, So we actually just finished our last show together. We were doing a show called Riverdale, and that lasted for 7 years. So we were done working together in that way. We still love each other professionally, but we're just, it was sort of running its course. So now I'm just, again, just kind of really off and doing my own things as I was before, but now, I guess on just, again, in a different arena, I was able to sort of turn the corner. But Blake was really the reason that I was able to sort of turn a corner for myself in my career. And again, not the only way to do it, but certainly one way. So yeah, it is here.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. That is a lot of amazing pedigree and experiences that you had. And so I'm going to go backwards, because a lot of what you brought up, I'd listened to a podcast that you were on recently or maybe not recently, I listened to a podcast, and there was a couple things that are apropos of what you mentioned. But I want to make sure I ask about Walter Murphy, because I am obsessed with Family Guy, and especially the music. I think those little cues, like, you know, when it flashes and it's the front of the house, those are the hippest things ever. And they always end on a sus chord. I've never heard one that doesn't end on a sus chord. They just have this vibe to it, and they're like 2 to 3 seconds. And if someday I get the time, I want to like transcribe all of them and just like put it out, because I think they're super hip. Please tell me about the process of Family Guy or Family Guy adjacent. And I guess that can kind of go into what is the TV schedule of a composer. What does that look like? 'Cause I have no clue.
Yeah, it's tight. It's gross. It's gross, really. Yeah. But you know,
tight, not in a good way.
I know exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not. It's
not
like,
tight.
It's tight. No, it's definitely not. First of all, if any of your listeners don't know this, Walter Murphy actually got his sort of big claim to fame by doing disco versions back in the day of well-known pieces. And the biggest, I think the most successful one was A Fifth of Beethoven, which is the disco version of Beethoven's Fifth.
Oh, he did that?
Him. Yeah, that was him. And he ended up doing like a bunch of them. So his skill set is like, was there like long before he was doing film and TV stuff. So I think when you get, you know, I forget the exact way that he and Seth MacFarlane got together, but it was something. Walter did the Pete Carpenter Fellowship. Oh gosh, hold on, sorry.
Can you hear me? See me?
I can. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, everything's cool on my end.
My computer said I needed to do an update, which we'll do later.
Oh, all good.
But so I forget how the two of them, he and Seth MacFarlane got together, but Walter had done some Pete Carpenter Fellowship, which kind of got him into the film and television world, that kind of thing. And I think he worked either with, or maybe, I think he got his start when, oh gosh, well, it just all back in the day, long before I came out here. But yeah, Walter's musicianship is so like endless. He's an amazing composer. He's one of those guys that can do pencil and paper. I grew up doing pencil paper, but I realized it was never going to be my thing. Like it was almost like I was, unbeknownst to me, I was waiting for technology to catch up. I was waiting for me to figure, you know, to find places where I could learn the technology, because pencil and paper to me was almost like writing something out, like a letter. Like we all grew up doing that, but all of our brains probably work a little too fast for at least for me, for my hand. Yep. That's why texting and typing is so much better, because it's keeping up with my, you know, and this isn't to say my brain works so fast.
I understand. Yeah.
I just mean I lack in that department. But
if you're channeling an idea, you don't want to have interference of like, well, I can't literally write it down fast enough. That's not, you gotta follow the muse.
Exactly. And I had one of those little recorders with the tiny little baby tapes, like when I was younger, and then I graduated to a digital recorder, had a little dictator machine type of thingy. And then of course now we have our cell phones, and I use voice memos all the time. Yeah. And I'm pretty much just strapped to my computer. So I'm always just putting stuff directly in there as well. But in any case, Walter's really amazing like that. But to get beyond to your question, you know, all those, you know, even when I was orchestrating, you know, all of his stuff was just already orchestrated out. So to say that I was orchestrating for him, at least on those, he does have an orchestrator who he works with a lot on his movies and stuff like that. But the stuff that I was doing was, you know, he'd already really thought all of that out, and the way that he decided to voice his instruments and the different families of instruments. And you know, what was really spectacular was to watch. You know, these guys in Los Angeles, I mean, there's amazing musicians everywhere. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, but the recording musicians in Los Angeles are just absolutely some of the best in the world in terms of sight reading and being able to not just read the music, but play the music, you know,
yes.
All the time. And a lot of that has to do with, this is kind of getting to your question about speed and about efficiency and about what, you know, a lot of that has to do with how the music is written, how the music is orchestrated, how the music is voiced. And if it's voiced, by somebody who actually understands the instruments, or is it voiced by somebody? And you know it because you're a teacher. So, it's like you kind of get it, and you see this music all the time. And so these musicians were able to just play it first time down was just absolutely perfect, because they're incredibly, skilled at their job. Walter's incredibly skilled at his job, and all of the members of his team, myself included, we're all doing what we're doing, and it's, everything works in lockstep. And then, voila, you've got a really smooth recording session each time on the day. But yeah, I mean, so obviously some of those bumpers are like really, really short, and it would take him gosh, he would just sketch those things out in 2 seconds, But then you get things like the chicken fights,
yeah,
or
right,
chicken fights, or the Star Wars parody kind of things, and it's he would spend days on some of those cues. But
wow.
to get to the television schedule, there's a couple of different kinds of television now. Before it was really just network television. And that's actually where I have a lot more experience. And now we have streaming, and streaming can often work on a different schedule. So with network television, it's week to week. Most of the schedules that I am keeping up, I am finishing music, delivering it to the dub stage, where they mix all of the, the music and the dialogue and the sound effects all together on the dub stage. And less than a week later, it's on air. So there's 100% no room for error. But that's not just on my part. That's that's on the shooting schedule. That's on the editorial. That's on post-production, all the way through to post-production, all the way through. So wow. It's relentless in that way. Streaming is a little bit different. Sometimes you have those crazy schedules that are really truncated, but it's because they really want a delivery so they can start to market things before it drops, as the kids say now. We don't say air anymore if it's streaming.
Yeah, right.
So I'll have a week to do on a network show. Oftentimes I'll have a week to do something. And if those are hour-long, let's say dramas or hour-long action, that could be an hour-long show is about 42 minutes, because you've got your commercials and your and all that kind of stuff. So when it actually airs, it's about 42 minutes of content. And you could have 40 minutes of music in there. You could have 37, something like that. 35 is a lot, but it's on the lighter side, sometimes in some of these types of things. And so I'll have a week to do it once I get locked picture to deliver it. So if that's recording, you got to back up a day or 2 days, if it's in. So sometimes there really is you have to take a lot of other things into consideration if you decide how you write something. Is there a budget to record? Is there a time budget to record? If there's not, I might write a little bit differently so I don't have to record things. Right.
And, my question with that is as a composer, and in my sphere, I compose for myself and whatever ensembles I want. So I could spend the rest of my days writing something and going back and editing. How do you wrestle with writing on such a short time frame, also being happy with your composing, or how much of it is all right, this fits the job that the director or whoever, the creative input, this kind of meets the parameters. Maybe it's not. If I had a couple more weeks, I would do some more things, but this is where it's at. Let's just do it.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think how you wrestle with it, I think, is like any of us do on a deadline. It's this is also, it's 100% my passion. I would do this if I wasn't getting paid. I would find a way to try and do it. And frankly, when I was just starting out, you're barely making any money. So you could really have to want it, but it's also a job. And so it's
right.
I think there's to a certain extent, it's this is a service industry. So there is a job to it. I make the distinction between creativity and craft. And they can be, of course, combined, of course, but sometimes the creative juices are just not flowing. And then you have to sort of lean on the craft of it. And it's this does not have to be my best idea, but it's got to be an idea that works.
Yep.
You got to run with it and go with it. But I imagine too, even in your world, yeah, sure. But you can go back and tweak something. But I imagine it's we've got a concert coming up. and there's a deadline, and you know your ensembles, and you know that those ensembles need a certain amount of time to rehearse, and maybe this year feels a little different than last year because your students' talents are different. So it's like, I can push this, I can't push that. I know I can. Well, that's my star player. This is my star group, so I know I can rob Peter to pay Paul a little bit. That kind of thing. It's like the face of that monster. And I say monster loosely. I mean, it's not always like a really like, oh my gosh, it's not always a detrimental thing, but the face of that, of those parameters. And I think that's the other thing too, is that I think that, one of the biggest differences about writing, art with commerce, combining art and commerce, and art for, let's say, the sake of art or something, which I don't really think that exists, to be honest. I think there has to be like a North Star, and sometimes that's money and sometimes that's, something. But in any case, I do think that there's, personally, I like parameters. I'm like, I think a lot of children like really like boundaries. They like to know where they are. And I think any of us who create, this is like our artist's child. And I feel like for me, I need those parameters, because I've always thought if I have 3 months to write something, it'll take 3 months. If
exactly.
I have 3 days to write it, it'll take 3 days.
Yep.
It's gonna go short. And
I'm the same exact way. I purposefully set dates and deadlines. Like last year, I was adjunct, and we have like a new music festival, and I have a suite of music that I wrote based on my great grandfather's poetry, and I was like, let's just pick this day, and I'm going to have a big band plus like all these string players and stuff. But like none of it was figured out. I just like set the day. I was like, all right. And then I got it done. I always work best when there's a deadline and it happens. Like I tell my students, like during COVID, like the lockdown times, like I was not shedding. I was not doing anything creative. It was a horrendous time just mentally for everyone. But like B, if I have like open kind of universe playground, like I actually am not apt to do as much because I need those parameters. And it's like, you said when we're kids, when we play, it's usually in a literal space that is boundaried. So like a sandbox has an actual boundary, a playground has a boundary, but within that you can go vertical forever. You have the infinite space of imagination that you can play with. So that's why I love improvising and creating, because with limitations, because it actually forces you to be creative in really interesting ways.
I agree. I think 100%. That's why I think in a lot of this, a lot of ways, like some of this really suits me in that way, because I'm always, and that's the thing with this job in general, there are always parameters that don't have anything to do with what you want. I mean, sometimes it is, but there's all kind. It's always a time constraint, a budget constraint. A lot of other cooks in the kitchen. It's their personal vision for things, which isn't to say that you don't get any say over things. It's just it's kind of a weird. It's a really weird sort of niche type of thing, and it's hard to explain to people as well. I mean, you sit down and write music all day. That's part of the job, but it's actually, when you look at the pie, it's actually less of the job in some ways, I mean, especially when you start to get into projects where it's like, I need to have a team of people. Like, for instance, I can orchestrate, but I don't have the time to orchestrate. And some of the music that I'm writing, there are really amazing orchestrators out there that I'm like, they're so much better at doing that job than I am at that job. I'm going to hire them, but I have to make sure that I'm managing that team and then working with the contractor to book the musicians. And I have assistants, and they have to pull those things in. So there's oftentimes I've got a quota of music that I need to write in a day. And if I don't make that quota, again, it's just like anything else on our list. I didn't get to that. It just goes to the next day list. But we know there are certain things I can't leave to that last minute. I can't write, 15 minutes in that day. I have to spread it out. So, it becomes a sort of, like we do with everything. You have to just juggle the things and manage a team. And sometimes I'm not even able to start my quota of writing until 4 or 5 o'clock at night, because in the morning were all of those emails and all these things to answer. And I said, by the way, when I said I had a week to do a show, that's for one show. If I have 2 shows or 3 shows, and at one time I've had 5 shows, It's
At once?
at once. Granted, it was not ideal, and it was really, really difficult. And they all had different parameters. It wasn't just like, okay, picture lock is always going to be delivered on Monday, and then everything has to be delivered on Sunday. That's not really the case, but it would sort of stagger. So I'd have to find a way to stagger and do that. So once you get to that place, and by the way, none of that had to do anything with writing music. That was all managing the team and managing and making sure that all the balls are being volleyed into someone else's court so that they can do their job. So when they volley back, in my court, I can, keep that ball rolling. But I mean, all of us are doing that in our lives anyway. It's very centered around work and music, and it's not just sitting around writing all day.
No. I mean, I always say, like, I get paid for schlepping my gear into the venue or the club. Like, I play music for free. That's fine. You pay me to carry my stuff around. Or now that I'm a full-time educator, you pay me to do all these damn emails all day. The teaching, I'll do all day, any day for free. It's fun.
That's actually so true. It's like, no, the music got written for free. I wasn't paid to write the music. I was paid to, deliver something, deliver a product. And that had only partially to do with the actual music that I'm delivering. Because you're delivering, you're delivering brand, you're delivering insurance, you're like insurance that it's going to get done. You're delivering confidence that you're delivering something like helping a collaboration and assurance, and making somebody really feel like, this elevated my project. I chose the right person. This was the right collaboration. This was the right partnership. You're delivering on deadlines. So again, assurances and making sure. I mean, the best thing is, like, if they leave you alone, I love that. If they leave me alone, because it means they're showrunners, which are like essentially the people, the creative people that you answer to on a television show or an episodic, or it's usually called a showrunner. And then you have directors who are working, that's generally more for film. They've got, for everything I listed off that I've got to do, they are at the top putting out fires in every department. I'm just heading up one department.
Yeah.
They're heading up all these departments. So if they just want to know that like the person that I have hired to manage that department is doing their job and really getting it done. And when I come around to make my rounds to check in on everybody, what do you have for me? So it's such an interesting thing. Again, it's art and commerce mixed together. And there's no lives on the line, but there's a lot of money on the line, and you think lives were at stake,
Yeah. Do you mind breaking down, like, I have a general idea of the roles of orchestrator, arranger, preparer, conductor, but like, what does that look like specifically in the field of TV and film media? And like, what does that team look like? How many people? What's the specific roles? How does that get scaled up when it's like John Williams level versus like, whatever? Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah. And it can work. Like the logistics can work in many sort of different ways, but globally, the general idea is the composer is once a composer's been hired to do a score, then it's like the composer is sort of leading that team. But again, we're like nobody. We're like the bottom of the food chain when all the time is gone and all the money is gone. You know what I'm saying? So you said your dad's like a line producer. It's like, okay, I'd like to talk to him about the budget that's being left over.
Right, because you're in post. You're not involved in pre or during the filming. Yeah.
And everybody has gone over budget with time and money, and where are they pulling it from? They're pulling it from the very, very last guy, which is the music, So it's, and people just don't really understand all the time, like, what we do. So, but in general, composer gets hired, and then through creative collaboration and conversations with your showrunner or director, you'll say, yes, this is the kind of score we want. This is the kind of, we want, let's say we're going to do an orchestral score. So since you asked about an orchestrator and you asked about conductor and that kind of thing. So I will go ahead and I'll start creating this score on films that need this, especially because recording stages get really booked up easily. So they'll say, okay, everything is working backwards from a deadline. It's just like in school, right? You just work back from a deadline. If the movie, if the film, the project has to be delivered on this day, you have to say, okay, we have to record no later by this day. And that's set in advance, a couple of months or however long you have, a few weeks, a couple of months, a year ahead of time. I don't know what it depends how big the project is. And on John Williams, it'll be like, they'll block out like 5 weeks to let this man record. You know what I'm saying? On a Sherri Chung project, we're blocking out a day. You get a single session. You get that kind of thing. But they'll block it out, and they'll book the stage, and that's kind of first. And you work backwards from there. Closer to that date, you'll start booking the contractor who books the musicians and books the stage. So I'll be in close contact with the contractor and say, hey, I need this. We got to book by this day. So can you please check availability at the main stages in town and and book those and put holds on them or something. And then, hey, this is the date. We've locked that in. Everybody's good with that. Okay, good. Go. Now go book the musicians. They go off and do their work. I continue writing. I reach out to my orchestrator and say, I've got this project coming up. Our recording dates are somewhere between this window and this window. I'll let you know as we lock it in. This is the kind of music we're pretty, and again, as I work more and more with my same orchestrator, I know that he's got a team in place that he can figure out those things. And so he'll just know, great. I just make sure that I get music no later than 5 days before, depending on how much music it is. Okay. If it's 40 minutes of music, that's fine. If we're talking about an hour or 2 hours worth of music, no, I need like 2 weeks or that kind of thing. So you back it up all the way from there. I'm still writing the music, or maybe I haven't even started writing the music. So it's kind of putting those things in place because that all has to be done ahead of time. And then for me, and then the conductor gets just booked along with musicians. Who do you want? But I'll choose and I'll say, this is my orchestrator. I reach out to my orchestrator. I'll tell my contractor, this is who I want for my conductor. Or I might, if I'm friends with them, I'll say, hey, are you available? Or I'll tell the contractor, can you please double check with so-and-so first? If they're not available for that date, go on to my second choice or whatever. And then for musicians, I have a tentative list of people that I love to work with, and it includes all my principal players. And I always want my principal players and maybe a couple of other players, please call them first. That kind of thing. So the contractor has a lot to deal with because they're making sure that, okay, for this date, but the musicians have, like, well, I want to accept this date for Sherri. And by the word date means the recording date, and I want to accept this one for this one. But if that session is in the morning, I need to get out of this one as I have this afternoon session I've already accepted. So that's all I'm in. I don't hear about those things. That's just all the underbelly of what the contractors and the musicians are dealing with, the conductor as well. Yeah. By the way, somewhere in there, I have to book my engineer for the same date and the mixer, who oftentimes are the same people. Again, I've maybe started writing music by this point, all that's sitting like worked out over there. But again, there's people that I call one person and I say, my contractor, yes, that's what it is. Put together this budget. What's great is when you start working for the bigger studios, they'll have a person on their end that will just reach out to me and say, hey, they'll start booking the things. And if it's maybe at Abbey Road, they'll make sure it's booked at Abbey Road. That's, in London, or if it's booked here in LA, they'll, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of people that will sort of, but again, those are all the emails that I'm dealing with at 9 in the morning, and then, but anyways, and then during that process, I'm writing the music and getting it approved and, and sometimes there's smaller recording sessions. Like let's say if we're just doing guitars, or bass or some of the solo instruments, and I don't want them playing with the strings because that's kind of wasting time. You know what I'm saying? We want strings to just be strings or whatever it is, and sometimes you have to bring over, book a smaller stage because it's cheaper. And then you bring over like the solo instruments or the smaller band if you have a band, and then you go to a bigger stage if you want to record strings or brass or, the full orchestra, something like that. So sometimes there's multiple layers of, we're, breaking all these things out. If you're John Williams, everything's recorded all at once because the man is just a master and a genius, and because he has unlimited resources.
Right.
Sherri Chung, that's very different.
is wild. Again, kind of growing up in the world of at least, hanging out on set and seeing the underbelly and talking to my dad. It's so many people, pretty much everyone that is not in the industry would just be absolutely shocked at what goes into it and how many people are involved with just one area of, the final product. So yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you for explaining that, because I just kind of never knew.
But to your point, isn't it really interesting that we can all of us do it, whether you've worked on the show or the movie or whatever, we'll all sit down and watch our Netflix and we'll be like, that show is crap. Or we'll go to the movie theater and be like, wow, that was wasted $20. And we all just dismiss it. We flick it away.
Yeah.
We don't realize that some people have spent years, not me, I'm always the last, but they spent years writing that script, shopping it around, getting it sold, producing it, raising the money, they years.
Their entire soul.
Yeah. It's their thing. And for me, it's like, wow, you have no idea how much it took out of me to create that score. And it's like, ugh, crap. We just consume, we all do it. We consume it.
Yep.
And then we just
burn it.
move on. We burn it. Exactly. And it's just interesting how, that's what we will do.
And with that part of the job, you're working with showrunners that, again, they're obviously invested in the project in every way possible. You're having to deal with, I assume, taking their visual or language ways of describing how they want the music, and then you're taking that information, that lexicon, and then putting it through the filter of, all right, your composer head, your musical head. What is that like? How do you even learn your own ways of talking to creatives that maybe don't have the musical language? They're not talking in like, all right, I'm going to want a flute doing, they're not talking like that. How do you extract those moods and say, if someone's like, all right, I want something spooky, and you're like, all right, to me, that means I'm going to have a nylon guitar playing like a tritone. Like, how do you make those decisions?
Yeah. I mean, you're like, it's a great question. You're kind of almost giving the answer, like in the question, which is like, you do. I think individually, we as composers, I think of myself first as a composer first, and then a film composer. And then the reason I differentiate is because exactly the question that you're asking. It's like it's an added layer. It's an added, I'll say skill set, but I say that respectfully. It's not me bragging and saying, I've developed this whole other skill set. I do think that we do over time for sure, but I feel like, composer first, and again, it's the whole idea of being able, or at least figuring out for myself, and then to every other composer figuring out for themselves, like that musical, that Rosetta Stone, something in there that like can help me translate. Okay, when you said, when something says spooky, I mean, one of the ways to kind of learn it for yourself is to watch a movie and put words to it yourself. You're like, wow, that was super terrifying. Why was that terrifying? Like, what made it terrifying? I think it's like any filmmaker when they're learning how to make their own films. It's like, well, what made that so scary? And it's like, oh gosh, well, I don't know. For me, it was like, oh, those like jump scares, like the sudden scares, the sudden, like the feeling of like, it's unrest. So you might say like, oh yeah, it could be tritones. It could be something that's, again, tonally unsettling, instrumentally unsettling. Like that was a really weird sound. That's what made. So it's like a lot of it is the creativity of it. It's like experimenting and saying, you know what, cool. We've had our creative collaborative conversation. I'm going to go away into my laboratory and I'm going to try and create something that I think is really working to picture. And by the way, something I do think is really fascinating is that I've learned over time that some instruments don't work on certain actors. It's fascinating to me. It's like, I don't know why. I have no idea why. But like sometimes, okay, I'm thinking guitar, and then you put it up against picture and you're like, it just doesn't work. This is not. My picture's up here, by the way. So if your listeners are looking upwards, after my picture is up on the wall, I have a TV mounted on the wall. But it's like, wow, this does not work. Or this character, like this just does not work. This character, it could make them feel like a little too earnest. Like that's why piano doesn't work on this character, because gosh, it just seems so sappy, and I don't want it to seem sappy. So I switch it out. Maybe guitar is the answer and piano's not the answer. maybe solo violin is just too saccharine. I don't know. So you have to, you figure those things out and you feel it out. Some of it's just literally like you're just feeling it out. And when you really believe in something, that's when you have to take it to your showrunner or your director and say, how does this speak to you? How does this resonate with you? And that's a really important, I like to word the question that way. Like, hey, do you like this? I really hope you enjoy this. Of course, I hope they enjoy it. Of course, I hope that
right.
Oh my gosh, Sherri, you're a genius. I love it. No notes whatsoever. But, that's not going to happen. I mean, very rarely does it happen. It's like, just like sometimes I'll just send them a piece of music that I wrote to picture, or sometimes I wrote it away from picture. I just wrote it with picture in mind as like my sort of first offer, as kind of going back to the analogy that you mentioned about the sandbox. And it's funny that you said that because I use that analogy a lot. I'm like, let me go away and create my sandbox. Let me create my parameters. Let me figure out my little tools. And then I'm going to send something back to you. And I just want you to listen to it, not to picture. You can throw it up to picture, in your edit bay if you want. But I didn't write it times to anything. So it's not going to hit certain things. But like, I always ask them, like, tell me what you think. Just tell me, do you hear this anywhere in your film? Does it resonate with you? What resonates with you? And if it doesn't, tell me why. If it does, tell me why. What do you think? Nothing personal. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Of course they're going to hurt my feelings, but you don't tell them that. I think it's just not personal. And they say, oh my gosh, this to me feels like this person's journey or this person's love theme. Like, cool, that's awesome. Maybe we were on the same page. And if we weren't on the same page, sometimes you go back to the drawing board. Sometimes they'll be like, this is a really great piece of music, but I just don't feel this at all in my project, in my story. Then we just go back to the drawing board. So it's, getting to your question. I'm so long-winded. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. This is great.
Getting to your question about like, how do you figure that out? A lot of it is, I will say this, it is much harder to talk about music than it is to talk about like to listen to music and talk about what you're hearing and what you're not hearing. Like it's hard for people to describe, I want it to sound like this. I mean, and people use lots of different tools. There's something called temp music.
Sure.
Track, right? It's like temporary music that already exists in someone else's project that they found, and they think they're geniuses when they find it and put it in theirs. I'm like, this is the thing that I want my score to sound like. And you have to kind of get past that and say, okay, well, it's not going to sound like that because, that's someone else's music, and that's your emotional attachment to someone else's film. And we know you don't want that. So you want something,
It's demo love.
It's demo love. And I try and encourage the people that I work with, because a lot of them have fear about not being able to properly convey their ideas because they don't have the musical knowledge. And I always encourage them. And a lot of composers, we try and encourage them and say, this, you honestly don't, unless you have musical knowledge, you can use it, but really don't talk to me like you would your actor. Talk to me like you would the talent. Talk to me like, oh my gosh, I really, like, this person's journey is so, it's so guttural. I want to feel like soulful. I really want to get into the depths of their journey. I'm like, oh, that's really helpful. You know what I'm saying? So words like, I want to feel this, or I need to feel this, or sometimes we didn't get the performance that we wanted from the actor. Can you really help convey this emotion? Because,
you kind of fill in the gap.
Yeah, so sometimes it becomes very much a job, like we did this, Sherri, because we did, kind of thing. But you have to keep trying and figuring out your own language and your language with them, with and that's why a lot of composers and directors end up working together for years and years and years, because once you figure out that language, you're like, yes, we figured it out. This is, now we can speak it freely, and now we can have fun and collaborate.
Yeah, it's so wild that, the music aspect is last in the timeline. But I mean, obviously I'm biased. I'm a professional musician, but if any of our favorite movies, if you took away the score, the iconic score, it just wouldn't be worth watching to me. So it's like, it's such an integral part, but you're jumping onto this runaway train everyone's already left because they've they've done the filming or whatever, and you're trying to jump on and like catch all the emotional things, all the baggage. You weren't there for filming. You don't know how everyone was acting and feeling and all that stuff. It's so wild how you kind of have to just instantly tap into a force that's been moving at 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's so true. And such a great way to put it. And that's exactly what it feels like sometimes, because you're kind of like, I've been on this project for 5 years and this is my baby. And you're just coming in here and putting your ideas all over. I mean, but here's the thing. I will say that my favorite collaborations are with the filmmakers and producers and showrunners, like those people that just understand that, like, look, I'm not going to know your mind. That's not my job. My job isn't to know your mind. Your job is to bring to the table your mind. And it's like, trust that I do what I do for like, this is my job. My job is to come in and not know you or to learn you, or like, let's say if we haven't worked together before, my job is to, and by the way, don't discount the freshest pair of eyes on this project. Everyone at that point, by the time we composers are there, most of the time, sometimes we come on quite early, sometimes we're even going to set, and giving music that early on. But by that point, there's nobody who hasn't seen this like a million times, except for so I encourage them. I say, do you want to watch this with me the first time, or because I haven't seen it, which means I might even reveal to you problems in your project, because I'm like, oh, I didn't actually understand that plot point at all.
Yeah, you're a potential consumer of it.
Exactly. And so I think the best collaborations are ones that can really value that and say, and that's something that I think first instinct and first impression is really important. It's not the only way, but it's really, really important. And I trust it a lot because it's important to me. Like that's the one thing, all the things that they think aren't good about the composers. If they're like that, it's like, oh, well, I'm the freshest pair of eyes, and that's something to be valued, at that point. And then after that, then I drank the Kool-Aid, and then I'm with them on
right.
So,
well, I want to hit the topic of school. Like you went to school first for composition and theory, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm curious just on like on the educational side, because when I think of like music theory and like getting a comp degree, I feel like, well, I guess what was you said you're a composer first. So how have you grappled with knowing all the mechanics of music and all of the heavy, side of things that you need to know to be a successful composer, but also being able to say, screw all that, I'm going to follow my own voice, and marrying the two, because I feel like school, especially academic music, music academia can be so prescriptive and so like down to the letter. Of course, that's up to the institution and your professors or whatever. But there's very much a box that's kind of centered in a certain, tradition of like Eurocentric theory, all that stuff. So like how did that education help you? But also how have you, if any ways, like gone to other sources outside of that?
I think that's really insightful of a question too, because for me personally, I took that route. I'm really glad that I took that route. In Berkeley, in Boston, they did at the time, they had an undergrad program for film music, and I applied to it and I got in, but I couldn't go, financial reasons, couldn't do it. And I was always like super, super bummed about that. And so I was always like, okay, cool. I'm just going to go, fine. I'll just go the stuffy formal training route. And, it turns out I thought it was really good for me because I realized it gave me a foundation. It's almost like learning all of your tools. It's almost like going to school and learning, more vocabulary and more like, focusing on. And the reason I think it was good to separate, at least for me, and not everybody's like this. And by the way, as we know, there's tons of people that just fall into this industry. They came from bands, they came from, rock groups, whatever. They're rock stars, and they're just like, bam, they just land it and go for it. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah. I was just listening to a podcast. I can't pronounce his name, but the cat from like The Last of Us plays the Ron Rocco. I can't remember what he was like famous in Argentina.
Gustavo Sandoval.
Exactly.
I know what you're talking about. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing it.
Yes, or even like the dude from like Beetlejuice. He was in. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I thought you have like Atticus, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I mean, you have Trent Reznor.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, I mean, screw those guys. I hate them. They're amazing, and there's so many others like that. For me, it was the right way to go. And I think because the more tools that I have, the more arrows in my quiver, if you will, I guess, for me, that kind of worked out for me. But I will say that I have known some composers and orchestrators that they're so like their brain works so academically. Like, this is the way we put together music. This is the way we structure music. I will create for you a wonderful piece of sound music. And I don't know why there's an accent involved with that.
No, I was just talking to my girlfriend because like Game of Thrones or any show that's like in some sort of anachronistic time, like in the past, like medieval, whatever, it's always like sort of British, and that like makes everyone like a little bit fancier. You can't just like, even though they wouldn't be talking in that accent because it doesn't make sense at all, it's always like, I talk like this. Yes, I have a little bit of an accent. And you can,
right? It's like everyone is smarter if they have any accent, in my opinion, but especially.
That's true.
Yeah, any accent. It's like, I wish I had an accent because I think I'd be taken more seriously. It's crazy, but I don't know why it was an accent. But yes, because pseudo British means you've got all this
it's stuffy and
stuffy. Yeah. But I will say that I do know some composers and orchestrators where they're so academically up in their head that what comes out is beautiful music, but it's not, and I'm saying this respectfully, but I'm saying it kind of really honestly, like it doesn't feel creative to me. It doesn't feel emotional, and it doesn't feel like it really connects me all the time to a certain picture.
Yeah.
I feel like there has to be a lot more vulnerability,
yep,
me in my creativity. Like of course I know theoretically how, but I don't write theoretically.
Yep.
I write by ear. I write by feel. I write by touch, if you will, closing my eyes and feeling around for the right thing. And sometimes that's literally closing my eyes at the piano, or that's, just metaphorically closing my eyes and going inward and saying, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is, and I think that to me is how, and I can't speak for other composers as they create, but for me, that I create some of my best work when I'm feeling it and I'm just going with it. And sometimes, I've got a little whiskey, I mean,
oh, hell yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying like there, I think that when academia, when that brain is so far, or when that hat is so like tight on our heads, and you can't get out from underneath that hat, it doesn't always serve us. That said, again, there's a time to call upon your craft.
Yes.
And those really difficult moments, let's say when you're on the recording stage and you're like, damn it, something is not working. What is going on? And that's when you need to put on your
absolutely
that hat, and you can be like, okay, well, hold on a second. I know music and I know what this isn't working because this is rubbing and these frequencies are just not jiving. And that's for sure, because I'm not as quick to figure out those problems when something's wrong in the room. And when you have these really great musicians who are out in the room and they'll say, hey, Sherri, we got to go through this chord. Something doesn't sound right in our section. And so you go block by block and you go vertically through your score and you try and figure out what's not working. And you've got some of the greatest ears out there on the stage. And again, my orchestrator, my conductor, they have amazing ears, better ears than I do. But that's when you have to call upon the craft. That's when, for me, my academia really kicks in, and it's really good. If I didn't have that training, I would only be able to rely on someone else if they could do it.
Exactly.
Another case in point, this is actually kind of fun. One of my assistants has perfect pitch. And he doesn't brag about it. We just sort of discovered it one day. He knew about it. He was really good and didn't tell me, you know. But I don't have perfect pitch. I have pretty good relative pitch, but I don't have perfect pitch. And there's times where I'm like, what is that note? Tell me what that note is. He'll be like, it's an E.
E.
It's not, whatever. Do you have perfect pitch?
No,
So you're a guitarist. You probably memorize.
I have all the strings in my ear, and then I can just go from there. So yeah, E, I know forever.
Okay, all right. So but it's great because then he'll just be able to say what that is, and I'll be like, great, awesome, guys. You're a little too overly balanced there. Can we either take a desk off of, you know, for the strings? Can we take a desk off of that note, or let me revoice this? You know, so again, it's like that's to me where academia really does come in. It really does help. But I will say this: it never gets in my way. I don't think it does, and I have seen it get into other people's ways.
That's the perfect way of putting it, because I'm teaching a jazz and pop theory course, and like I've just always. I don't even like that I teach a theory course by itself, because it doesn't make any sense to abstract theory. So it's not just theory, but I feel like it can be such a burden. It's such like, oh, I have to like stick to this. Well, I can't do that. It's like, no, theory is a way of describing music that has already occurred. It's a way of putting things in a box and saying, hey, typically in this style of music or in this idiom or in this part of the world, they kind of do things like this because of the practice that has already occurred. But also, you don't have to do any of that, because you have free agency as a composer and human to say, this sounds good. Nothing can really trump that, whether it's theoretical or not.
I love that so much. And I love that that's what you're teaching. And I love that that's your mindset, because I will admit that that's not how I did my undergrad. In fact, I think that was one of the things that there were things I wasn't learning. There's gaps in my education. I mean, now I think I'm filling them in over time, but I think in that stage of my, you know, my schooling, my matriculation, you know, in that stage, it was like, it were gaps because what I was being taught, I'm like, I don't feel that though. I understand that that's how I can analyze my music, but I don't feel that. I do think it was still important for me to learn that, but I'm with you on that. For me, I think now the theory of it is more important in terms of recognizing what is already there, what's already there. And this is how I learned better orchestration, or I learned orchestration better than just by like studying it with the classes, although you should, because that's actually where you learn it the most, I think. And I think the other way you learn it is by, go ahead, write something. You want to resist all that schooling? Go ahead, write something and put it in front of live musicians and hear how crappy it sounds. And you're like, I don't understand it. It sounds really great in my computer. Exactly.
Yeah, you need that, the literal feedback of musicians. Yeah.
You need that and realizing
expensive feedback.
Expensive feedback. And it's expensive not just in that money, but also in that time. And it's like, wow, that just that was my little indie or my student film that they only had $5,000, which is a lot, by the way, for a student film. And I put all that money in there, and then you get it back and you're like, why does this not sound as good as my demos did? And they're not liking it and they don't understand. It's like, yeah, because computer samples are not moving air, you know, and what sounds really clear and powerful and juicy in your computer samples sounds muddy in real life.
Yeah.
Because you put your basses, you know, on a different rhythm as your trombones, as you know, as your tuba, because you didn't understand the theory of what you were creating.
Yeah, you know? The computer can't handle timbre, so it's like can't
handle frequency.
Exactly. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I did want to ask, because this is intersecting beautifully into one thing I really wanted to make sure I talked about, because I, as an improviser, I feel like improvisation is again, I'm pretty hardcore left on this topic. I feel like improvisation is by far the most important asset to a musician, whether or not they improvise in a performing sense or whatever, because, like Bach was improvising, like composers, everything is an improvisation. At some point, it's just slowed down, or at whatever point it happens, and then it gets codified by either being written or recorded. But improvisation is at the genesis of art. So where do you lie on the improvisational spectrum? And like you said, you give yourself time to close your eyes and feel things and touch things. How has that sort of intuition part versus the theory part guided your journey?
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I completely agree with you. I think improvisation is like really, really important. As a composer, my improvisational skills would certainly not hold up in like a band setting or like a jazz. I mean, honestly, you jazz musicians are like, and especially if you're a jazz guitarist, which I can see that you are.
I am.
Yeah, I'm just like, you guys are just like gods, because I feel like, to me, like really jazz guitarists and jazz pianists, I'm like, holy cow, because that's two hands. I mean, jazz musicians, yes, sure, absolutely. But just to me, that is just, you don't need anybody but guitar. And a pianist doesn't need really anybody but piano. But bass, trumpet, nobody really wants to hear that, like solo. Right. You guys need other people, but for me, that's the basis of composition. Is improvisation. There's so many little golden nuggets that I feel like were just mistakes. They were just happy little accidents, and that's just like, whoa, I didn't even know that was going to land that way. But holy cow, that was it. That was version 1. That's all I got. Drop, like just mic drop, or that's the idea that I'm going to go with the most. And to me, that's the art. That's not the craft, for me. Oh, yes. I mean, there is a craft in improv.
Of course, yeah.
But let's just say improvising is all like, the vulnerability of it, just going with it and just saying, yeah, I'm just gonna see where this goes and have an open mind. I mean, it's an invitation, and I think there's a time for that. And I do think in my job, just to bring it back to there for 1 second, the improvisation to me, that's where it starts. It comes from the creating. It comes from letting that inner child literally just play and have fun, which is one of the reasons when I start a project, after I have the creative conversation, I look at picture, or sometimes it's only in script form. But then after that, I don't write to the timing of anything, because to me, that's too many parameters. I put some parameters on and I feel it out and I say, okay, it's going to be maybe have this instrumentation, but I'm leaving it open. But I just write, and just to kind of like kick out all the walls. There's no walls. There's no yeses. There's no nos. It's like your diary. It's like no one has to read this. You don't no one has to read it again. Like no one has to read this. No one has to ever see into that world. I will have to come up with something that is going to be seen.
But it sets the intention and the mood.
Yeah, it's just journaling. It's and improvising with your words, or in this case, with our notes, or with my hands, or with, or with my voice. So sometimes it's just a good way to just, you do it that way. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to probably sing as many wrong notes as I'm going to play wrong notes while I'm improvising it in that way. But then after that, I will say there does have to be an intention at some point, where it's not as much improvisation as it is, okay, this is the idea I've thought of, and now we have to move forward, and now there needs to be structure.
Putting some rubber cement on the crease, on the lines.
Exactly. So for me, it's really, really important. And I think that my best work has really come from that. I don't write academically. I don't write theoretically. In fact, one of my favorite things to do, and it's so silly, but one of my favorite things to do is, after I've written a piece, I go back and then I meter it, and in my sequencer. So in my DAW, okay. I don't meter it as I'm writing it. So it's really interesting to me that I'll go back. And I was in 5/4 that whole time. That's so crazy. I didn't think, I didn't think in 5. I mean, I was thinking in 5, but I wasn't thinking in the number 5. That's just what I was feeling. Wow, this is like so it's just one of these, it's so silly. It's kind of nerdy too, but it's really just silly that I always write on a click. So I write because everything I'm doing is going to have to be to picture. So I always write on a click.
Right.
Sometimes I turn the click off and I just feel it, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I figure out what my steady tempo was later. But once I figure that out, like if this is my pace, this is my tempo, I stay on a click. But I don't always meter it. I don't always know.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's so sad. But I think it just sort of exemplifies the thing that I just feel it. It always ends up being very musical, because that's what
of course, because of the craft part too.
Exactly.
Because all of your pedigree, all of your studies, you're at such a high level in the craft that it's not going to be musical. There's probably no way that you could not write something musical at this point, unless you actively tried.
I would like to think so, but I mean, I've definitely created some dumpster fires before. Sure. No one has to see that one, but yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, but yeah, it's a really fun and really fulfilling career, but it's hard. It's really hard. And I tell anyone who wants to get into it, you're going to have to want it. Like if you really want to get into it and you're not really sure, try it, see what happens. But it is a service industry. And I think that you really have to want it because there are no guarantees. And I know there's no guarantees in life, and we know this, but it's not like if you really want to become a teacher, and I'm not downplaying anything, if you want to become a doctor, if you really want to become a lawyer, there are certain steps you have to take. You cannot get your degree, you cannot get your certification or your license, or you can't teach at a certain level if you don't follow these steps. You have to follow these steps. In this industry, there's a lot of, I make the joke, there's no rules, but don't break any of them.
Right.
Because there's, word gets around and all that kind of thing. But yeah. You don't have to go to school for this. You don't have to go to school. There's so many successful people. We mentioned a bunch of them that didn't learn or have formal training. They did learn, but they didn't have formal training. They just learned as they went. So you don't have to do that the way that I did it. And there's also no guarantees. You can't just say, oh yeah, I want to be like John Williams. I mean, John Williams never set out to be like John Williams, know? And John Williams didn't even really get, in what we call successful until into his 40s, So,
I know.
Yeah. Right. So, but I mean, he was successful. He was a gigging musician. He was a jazz pianist and a violinist.
Yeah. Right. And a big band arranger.
Yeah. It just depends what you call success and what
exactly.
you success. But it is incredibly fulfilling if you can really, incorporate into your life that it is about the journey, because you can't make winning the Oscars and the Emmys and the Grammys or just the accolades or having that really, or even having a project that everybody's heard of. You have no idea the success of your projects, that you're not in control of any of those things. You're only in control of, focusing on what your journey means to you. And it's like, what happiness is meaning to me is, working on projects that challenge me musically, but are also fulfilling. Like, do I like the music that I was writing? Do I like working with those people? And that was a successful project. But I don't know if that movie that came out or that show that comes out is going to like hit it big and be a huge hit, like the show Wednesday or Queen's Gambit. And I know those composers well, and they had no idea.
The process is the product.
Exactly. There you go. Ooh, I love that. Soundbite time.
Oh no! I teach an improvisation class, and that's literally what the whole class is. It's like you showing up with your instrument and making sound. Boom! You're successful. You're a successful improviser. The process is the product, and we get so caught up in that, especially in school. That's why I love academia so much. I've done the degrees, but I've also had so much street training that I personally am. I don't know why this suddenly turned about me, but I'm trying to take what I've learned outside of school and in school, and kind of just break down some of these like stuffy British style. No, because ultimately we're all gonna arrive at the same place, and I like to do it in a way that's fun. I like
to do it the hardest, most difficult way possible.
Yeah.
that's what I do. I equate pain with success.
Don't we all?
Everything. I mean, no one use me as an example. But no, I mean, that's obviously not what I'm trying to do. I sometimes look around me and I'm like, I think I'm just clenching too much. I really don't think we need to grip this hard, Sherri. And I'm learning that over time. I really, really am, because I feel like again, in this industry, and again, I think in any industry as a musician, it takes time to season. It takes time to sink into that, and that's why when I feel like I love that so much. I'm going to repeat it because I want to remember it for myself, that the process is the product. I think that is such a beautiful way frankly, of living life, and certainly a career in music or in something creative. And I love that so much. I mean, that's really, it's a great way of saying it's just about the journey. So figure out what you want in your journey, and it'd be great to have, those accolades or those recognitions from your industry and those, which are the awards. And it'd be great to say, oh my gosh, I did this show and everybody has seen it and it feels so validating, but it's really hard not to, to equate, our success with our self-worth,
Oh my God.
It's so hard to do. I mean, just in life.
Say that again.
Right? Exactly. It's like, and we have to make sure that it's not like my success as a composer can only be, given from me. I mean, it can be given by me comparing other people. It can be taken away by me comparing, that person got that project and that project is so big, so huge. And now that everybody knows who they are, and it means all of these, all these next levels have been unlocked for them. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, maybe not.
Exactly.
It's so difficult, but again, very rewarding, very fulfilling.
It's just funny that you said like jazz musicians, jazz guitarists are gods, because I'm like, film composers are gods. The grass is always greener.
We're nobodies. You can ask any of the budgets that I get. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Good to know. You can look at any of my contracts.
Oh my gosh. Well, Sherri, thank you so much for spending the time with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I just want to say I was listening to the Happiness for Beginners soundtrack, and I love this score so much. It's amazing. I love obviously the guitar, but it's just it's really, well, I don't know. I don't have a good way of expressing it right now because I've done a lot of talking today, but it's a wonderful score. And if you have is that like your latest thing? That's just what I saw came up on Spotify. Like what's your projects right now?
I appreciate it. I will say this. I actually literally have like 3 latest things that I don't normally have so many things that come out, but it's like I finished them and then they didn't come out. And then I finished a couple of other projects and they didn't come out. And then all of a sudden they all dropped at the same time. But Happiness for Beginners is one of the latest ones. So that's a movie on Netflix. It's very sweet. It's very cute. And then also an animated series that I did, Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai. That was, again, not just for kids, it's for any Gremlins fan. It's really good. And so season 1 is out on Max, and the soundtrack is out for that. And then I had another show on Peacock called Based on a True Story. And that dropped, I guess maybe back in June or July, I think, actually. So it's been a minute, but it's out there. And that soundtrack also came out. And then one more thing, actually, the soundtrack for seasons 2 and 3, the final seasons, unfortunately, for Kung Fu, which was a show that was on CW, and now I think it can be found on Max or something like that. But those those soundtracks also just came out as well. So there's been kind of a few projects. Again, that's what I was really, really busy with, but again, they all kind of dropped at the same time and just kind of came out. But thank you so much for listening to it. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, seriously. It's like perfect. It's perfect. This sounds stupid, but it's perfect listening music. Like I had it on my office. It's been really, really crazy couple weeks starting this new job, like actually like mind meltingly. And I put it on and I was like, oh, it was just like a nice blanket.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That actually makes me feel really great. Cause I think that's literally what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to just kind of, just envelop a person, in the film. And it's just, I love hearing that. But yeah, I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the time. Like, thank you so much for having me on.
Oh.
I appreciate your questions and I appreciate the, just the conversation, because it's just great to talk with other musicians and,
yeah.
other people that get it, and whether or not we do the same thing for our like gainful employment, we're British again, gainful employment.
Right.
It's still, there's such a there's connective tissue in all of it,
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. I'm always lucky to show up to. I don't go to work. I go to play. We don't work music. We play it.
Yes, exactly. I do both.
Yeah, I know. Of course. Yes. It is a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of hard work. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's like, I literally am doing what I want to be doing for a living. I'm like you. It's like, I'm not going to my job. People say, oh, do you have to work today? It's like, well, it's a little different than that. It's a little, but it's like, I would do this whether it was a job or whether, or not, and that is, man, there's a lot of people, as we know, that just, they have to go to that job because they have to make the money, and it's like, for me, it's like, no, I struck gold. I get to do what I love to do for a living. And that's that right there. That is, victory right there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sherri, so much for being on Beyond the Frets. And I hope, let's keep in touch, please.
Yeah, please. I would love that. And like, I hope I hope it's not too hot in Ohio. By the way, Portland, Oregon is beautiful. So thanks so much, Zach. I'll talk to you soon.
Right on. Later.
Portland's great.
Portland is awesome. Actually, this can go off the record, but like, as far as work, are you working with the strikes? Like, how does that affect?
Yeah, I'm basically just finishing up projects that were already kind of like are still able to be finished because they're not in that part of the process. They're in a very, very late part of the process.
Got it.
But after those projects wrap up, I will be out of work until.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh
but
gosh.
I stand strong with them. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
It's really important turn in our industry, and we need it, and it's good. And so I'm I'll be out of work. But you know what? I will say, for me personally, and I mean this respectfully to those who have been out of work for a while and are not doing as well, I was going to take a break anyway. So I'm not going to lie. I could actually use a little bit of a break. I'll probably be singing a different tune in a month, but of course. Yeah, but right now I'm not able to work past, like I said, what my project
your obligations. Yeah. Wow.
So it'd be crazy, but it's a lot like the pandemic, and it was, we were all like, what's happening?
Well,
when it all comes back, it's going to come like a bad hell. So
yeah, enjoy it.
I will. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Awesome, Sherri. Well, thanks again. And actually, do you mind? Can I get your personal email?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat, or I can,
and I'll copy it.
I mean, it's super easy. It's Sherri Chung at sherrichung.com, but I can't hear it.
Makes sense.
I know, right? It's me.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then please shoot me an email so that I have yours.
I will.
Yeah. And good luck with the new job. And by the way, thanks for being a teacher. Thanks for being in the education system.
Oh.
It's important. And it sounds like you're like really, really great for the program and for those students. So I feel like they're lucky to have you. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. This is also, I stumbled into it 10 years ago. I was I was a dumb, hot-headed guitarist that wanted to play jazz and just like be a jazz rock star, and had no idea about teaching or wanting to teach. And then, 12 years later, I'm obsessed with teaching. It's like the best thing ever. Maybe in 12 years, who knows? I'll be a firefighter. I don't know, whatever. We'll see what happens.
That's an important job too.
Yes, it is. I probably won't be a firefighter.
Awesome.
All right. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Sherri. I hope you enjoyed that interview just as much as I did. Sherri is a treasure. She has so much energy, so much positivity, and so much, of course, beautiful art within her. And I'm really, really excited to see where she goes next. She's clearly going to be in our ear holes, probably on every streaming platform at this point. So if you find some great music on a new show, chances are it's written by Sherri. I know that I really like that Happiness for Beginners soundtrack. It's just phenomenal. Well, I hope you stick with Beyond the Frets and give us a like, follow, rate, share, review. You know what to do. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.